When you meet someone that makes you feel like no other person could ever matter to you in the entire world, you'd be willing to do things for them that you wouldn't do otherwise. Timid folks tend to step out of their comfort zones and do things they'd usually deem risqué. Calmness is replaced by violent defensiveness, and the longer these emotions persist, the lower the chances that either party would want to get out of them. This is the dynamic that Griffith shares with Sonia, though it's entirely one-sided. The Falcon Seer is one of the most misguided characters in the entire series. She serves a demon thinking he's the savior of humanity, but there's a chance she might end up betraying him thanks to the memories of a certain owl. In this video, we're going to take a look at every reason that could motivate Sonia to betray Griffith. And while that might feel impossible right now, trust us when we say there's enough foreshadowing about it, so let's get straight into it. Who is Sonia? How did she first meet Griffith? To understand why Sonia and Griffith's relationship is foundational to the latter's new life, we have to understand who Sonia is first and how meeting Griffith changed her life, because that's the starting point of their relationship. Much like Casca, Sonia too was rescued by Griffith when they first met. This detail is going to be important for later, so just keep it in mind. Now, let's ask the more obvious question if you're someone that hasn't read Berserk yet or you're clueless to who this random girl is. Who exactly is Sonia? Well, she's a Midlander that lost her parents to the Kushan invasion, like many other girls from the kingdom. What makes her special, however, is the fact that Sonia can see, hear, and experience things that other humans cannot. Sonia was born with a special sensitivity to astral happenings. What this basically means is that she possessed powers that pretty much made her the Berserk version of the Oracle of Delphi. Sonia saw dead spirits where people only saw dead trees. She heard the moans of tortured souls where others only felt the wind on their faces. With the right amount of training and guidance, she could have become a prodigious mage like Farnace and Schierke. But alas, Sonia grew up in hardcore Holy See country, and the only things that she was taught was that God was supreme and she was a freak. She grew up being bullied and laughed at by the people she thought were her friends, simply because she was different from them. And then, the Kushan came and took her parents away as well, burning them right in front of her eyes. The other women that were in Sonia's prisoner queue felt bad for her because she was giving them the equivalent of a 1,000-yard stare. They knew she had just seen her parents killed in the most gruesome way imaginable. They thought her gaze was one of despair. Little did they know she was in fact in a prophetic trance. As an oracle, Sonia is extremely susceptible to visions of the future. She's not aware of this as a conscious fact because whenever Sonia spits a prophecy, she tends to forget she did it right after. But for the time that she's delivering said prophecy, Sonia's eyes go wide and semi-blank, and she tells you your fate while staring a hole through your soul. Because the women around her had never experienced such a thing, they didn't know that this was the root cause of Sonia's 1,000-yard stare. As for the actual reason behind it, that would be the vision she was experiencing in that moment, and this is where Griffith comes in. As the Kushan army rounds up the remnants of her city's women and children, everyone gathered has but one collective unspoken thought. When was the Falcon of Light going to save them? Midland was a deeply religious territory, and the Holy See had a stranglehold on its religious systems. The idol of the sea is a falcon, mid-flight, with a double helix spreading out from the region where its talons should have been. No direct mention is made in the series as to the significance of this symbol, but the meaning makes itself evident when every common person desires Griffith to set them free. Not a moment after the women with Sonia are done expressing this belief, then the Falcon arrives to relieve the siege of Sonia's hometown, Shet. When the Kushan had just begun invading Midland, the kingdom was in a state of severe decline. The plague was running rampant, heretics were drowning in major towns and cities, and the king had gone insane. It was a desperate time that called for a savior to bring salvation to the people and the suffering world at large. Chapters 126 through 28 set up Griffith as being that savior because in those chapters, the God Hand member appears within the collective consciousness of all those who practice the Holy See faith and convinces them that he's their be-all, end-all. He doesn't do so with some grandiose speech about morality or a lecture on how humans would be dead and buried if they didn't follow him and him alone. He simply does it by showing the people the current state of the world, and then himself in the form of a bright falcon cleaving through it and bringing them salvation. This dream was likely seen by every human in the world that actually practiced the dogmatic traditions of the Holy See. It's possible that Sonia too saw this dream at some point in her life, but to be perfectly honest with you guys, we don't think Sonia is one of those people. She's always been too outspoken and too unnaturally happy to follow such a depressing way of life. However, whether she'd seen this dream or not became irrelevant the moment Sonia went into prophecy trances that revealed Griffith's imminent arrival. When she was in that state, Sonia claimed that the winds whispered to her that help was coming, and then it did, and in spectacular fashion, we gotta say. Griffith just randomly shows up at Shet, killing the general besieging it, and sets about slaughtering every Kushan warrior that dared to cross him. By the time he was done, he had at least 20 apostles kneeling at his feet and the undivided attention of one Sonia. She was immediately captivated by Griffith's magnetic ode the moment she laid eyes on him, though she didn't know what any of that meant at the time. All Sonia knew was that she was asked about a savior and one had arrived right in front of her. Also, huge bonus points because Mr. Savior turned out to be a total hottie and the way he handled business was bloody yet brilliant in Sonia's eyes. After Griffith's apostles were done snuffing the life out of every single Kushan warrior left in Shet, they knelt to their natural master as a show of respect and loyalty. If one was to take in the scene without any context, it would come off as a grotesque massacre, we're not gonna lie. But because doing so further cemented Griffith's status as mankind's savior, even this blood-soaked battlefield looked like an inimitable painting to Sonia, who had spent most of her time during that battle gawking at Griffith. The young oracle was young after all, and how could she have withstood Griffith's incredible beauty, which had increased exponentially since his incarnation? Sonia could sense that the Falcon of Light felt otherworldly, but she hadn't the patience, time, or space to question why that was the case. She felt drawn towards him and even warned him about a sneak attack from Silet's Depasa because of it. Once Griffith had liberated Shet, Sonia felt as though they were now in the midst of some extraordinary tale, but she still didn't know the role she was going to end up playing in it. She would find out over the course of her association with Griffith. What happened after Sonia met Griffith? What is their dynamic? After the liberation of Shet, the Falcon of Light had no place to send his newfound camp followers off to, so he decided to keep them on instead. Sonia likely took advantage of this and the fact that she'd saved him from a Depasa ambush to get close to him as one of his most trusted assets. Griffith didn't need a special magnifying glass to see the potential of Sonia as an ally. This girl could get past the veil that guarded the borders of the physical and astral world. She could hear the whispers of spirits and see into the future. She could use her telepathic powers to make any person do whatever she wished them to do. And, most importantly, she seemed like she had completely bought into Griffith's propaganda. The Falcon of Light is the harbinger of doom for the Berserkverse in truth. He's the man that the prophecy of the Falcon warns about, and if Sonia had even an inkling of this prophecy, she'd have probably backed off from helping Griffith. It's because she didn't that she volunteered her astral services to the Falcon in exchange for something we'll address soon enough. Sonia's addition of the reborn Band of the Falcon gave them the biggest strategic boost of all time. She could read the flow of ode on any given battlefield and trace it to its source. Once that happened, Sonia would direct Griffith in that direction and the Falcon would then take care of business by eliminating it, which usually meant him killing the enemy general. Using this rather basic yet effective strategy, Griffith managed to liberate most of Midland and many regions beyond it as well, making him rely more and more on this young girl for his biggest victories. And that's not all he counted on Sonia for. Besides being an impeccable asset to possess during a battle, Sonia is also a seer without peer, which is something that ends up working out really well for Griffith. On one particular occasion, Sonia gave Nosferatu Zod, who's one of Griffith's most trusted captains and war demons, a prophecy about how he would soon have to wrestle with either resisting a sword that once cut his flesh in vain, or embracing it and making it his own for a specific purpose. When Zod asked her for more clarity, she blanked on what she'd said in the first place, considering her nature as an oracle. But her prophecy did come to pass soon after, and it happened in such a way that it ultimately ended up benefiting Griffith. The only reason Zod would ever agree to using Dragon Slayer as a weapon was if it was being aimed at an enemy of Griffith's. Considering both the Falcon and the Black Swordsman had beef with Emperor Ganishka around the time Zod's prophecy was supposed to be coming true, his decision became much easier. He chose brief coexistence over not accomplishing the goal set out for him by his master, and that would have never happened if it wasn't for Sonia. Zod came to the realization that he needed to work with Griffith in Britannis and not against him, because he recalled her words. Thanks to her plethora of useful abilities, Griffith decided to make her his residential seer and battle overseer. With her help, he was able to streamline his assaults and maximize his victories. He was able to plan far ahead what any regular human or apostle could be prepared for. He won the pontiff over to his cause and convinced humans that fighting alongside literal demon spawns was a good idea. Sonia essentially became Griffith's most reliable subordinate and his biggest cheerleader. She wasn't doing this just out of a sense of amazement, though, and this is where the Casca comparison becomes relevant. He exploits her powers in exchange for one-sided love. Why Sonia is crucial to Griffith's war plans. To put it plainly, Sonia is deeply in love with Griffith. It happened the day she saw him, and it continued to grow through their continued association. To her, the Falcon isn't just a savior, he's the only person in the whole world that she can identify with. So it frustrates her that his romantic attention is focused solely on Princess Charlotte. In Sonia's mind, she's the kite to Griffith's Falcon, but her Falcon was being forced to marry the Queen of the Ducks because politics. Sonia has never verbalized her feelings for Griffith, but they're evident in the way she behaves around him. She becomes extremely possessive of him and self-congratulatory as well, always pointing out how, without her help, Griffith would be helpless, but in the most subtle of ways possible. Her dynamic with Griffith actually mirrors the one he had with Casca, because the two relationships follow eerily similar trajectories. Griffith saves a girl from a terrible fate, puts on a dazzling display of heroism, and ends up becoming the sole object of their desire. Then that girl joins his band, becomes one of its leading members, and is quick to insult anyone that doesn't treat Griffith like a god. If that doesn't ring any bells in your head, then you must not have read Berserk or something, and it's not like Sonia's fate diverges from what happens to Casca because of her unexpressed love either. She is constantly on the lookout for spending more time with her beloved Falcon, and when that doesn't work out, she either bullies Mule because of it, or goes off on a solo gallop. Any person with working eyes could see her passive aggressiveness towards Charlotte because of her status as Griffith's betrothed. And because Sonia never put her feelings into words, Griffith never had any reason to explain himself, his choices, or even try to make a change in either, though we're sure he's completely aware of the effect he has on her. Griffith knew that he could make women swoon without even looking at them back when he was a human, so it's a bit of a stretch to think he doesn't know it now, especially given that he's a God Hand member. This is why we said in the subhead of this section that he exploits her feelings towards him to take advantage of her powers. Griffith always makes sure that he affectionately praises Sonia's efforts, and he never turns her down himself, at least not explicitly. On one occasion, the kite was pissed at the fact that her Falcon was spending time with his ugly duckling, and it showed in the way she was treating Charlotte. But she left before things got out of hand because, number one, Mule intervened, and number two, Griffith didn't exactly say anything to keep her around. Griffith rarely speaks now that he's been incarnated as a God Hand on Earth, so it's up to his followers to understand his unspoken intentions. Sonia probably knows that he didn't have any feelings towards her and that he needs to marry Charlotte to achieve his dream. But we're not sure what she thinks regarding this particular topic because we never get to see her internal thoughts on the matter. On the other hand, Griffith is more than happy to use Sonia's near-prescient powers to win battles and open up pathways through the night sky and a bunch of other things. Sonia's sensitivity to the astral world gives her the ability to see the hidden details of that other world manifested in the physical one. So, when the band of the Falcon comes across a bunch of Stonehenge-looking rocks that Griffith knows are actually magic pathways through the sky, Sonia is one of the only people who can safely lead the Falcon soldiers through them, alongside him, of course, or so she claims. Thanks to her ability to see the souls of the deceased and interact with them to a certain extent, Griffith gets Sonia added to the Holy See as his High Priestess, so she can help him out when sorting through scores of the dead is too much for him. His reward for her is his very presence and nothing more, because like we told you a few moments ago, Sonia never expresses her true feelings to Griffith. And even if she did, we're not sure if she would just accept them, considering his dream would be put to the stake because of it. So this is clearly an exploitative relationship being dressed up as one of admiration and one-sided love, which is half true. Sonia does love Griffith, but there's no admiration here. She outright worships him, so you can imagine the effect it would have on her psyche when she found out her god was actually a demon who sacrificed his lifelong friends to become king. And there's already a pathway laid down for her to make that discovery in the form of her relationship with Schierke. The Owl and the Kite at the Wharf. How and why Sonia will betray Griffith in the end. Before the Falcon of Light's war demons confronted Emperor Ganishka's forces in Britannis, his entire band had a bit of free time on their hands, including the ever-busy Sonia. She decided to visit Britannis before it was likely reduced to a smoking wasteland, and there she met someone she'd never expected to meet, a friend. When Sonia reached the harbor of Britannis, she came along a solitary Schierke, who was surrounded by birds and ruminating on the cruelty of humans. This Holy See territory was her first time visiting a proper city, and the young witch was disgusted by it. Everything was timber and stone here, and there wasn't an ounce of nature's love present in Britannis. On top of that, they treated their dead with impunity, letting their corpses hang in public squares for days on end, if not weeks and months. Schierke came across one such grisly display and decides to dispense justice of her own making. She frees the souls of every corpse from their mortal bonds and hypnotizes the soldiers guarding them into helping her with it. This is one of the most casually badass things Schierke has done in the series, and it was witnessed by Sonia. She didn't see Schierke interacting with the guards or the corpses, but she saw the souls of the dead float their bodies as glowing balls of light, which was something she had already seen Griffith do. This piqued her interest, and she tracked down the person responsible, which led her to Schierke. The pair immediately hit it off as two outcasts in a cruel world. Sonia had always been discriminated against because of her unique nature, and the same was coming true for Schierke of late. The former could sense it and broke into a story about her life as the Kite and her pursuit of the Falcon. But thanks to her encounter with this shy new owl, she added a new character to her story, a friend she could always return to. Schierke and Sonia bond a lot because of their shared eccentricities. They're both young girls with arcane powers and obsession with men far older than them. They both had discriminatory life experiences that have helped mold them into the women they're becoming. And neither can stand predatory behavior, especially when it's unfolding in front of them. As the two mages were conversing, the pirate crew of Captain Bonebeard arrived at the harbor, ready to take off from the docks with a fresh batch of Kushan child slaves. Sonia and Schierke's moral compasses couldn't abide this one bit, so they confronted the pirates. And with help from their respective attendants, that being Mule and Isidro respectively, the two birds managed to secure those children's freedom. Following that incident, Sonia asked Schierke if she'd like to join her because she felt that the owl didn't have anywhere to call home. At that very moment, Guts sent Schierke a thought transference, so she declined the generous offer, but then Sonia said something odd. She said that the Kite and the owl were destined to meet again one day, and because her eyes went blank and wide when she said it, we're confident saying this wasn't a promise, it was a prophecy. And this prophecy is what will end up leading Sonia to betray Griffith. So far, Sonia thinks of Griffith as a perfect utopian leader who's godlier than God himself. She usually doesn't show any emotion besides her cheerful enthusiasm, but when Rickert slaps Griffith in front of her and a few other key Falconians, the smile is wiped off of Sonia's face. She can't understand why someone that had already worked with her idol was now disrespecting him like this, but she doesn't exactly question it too much. Or at least, that's what was shown at the time. As Griffith's campaigns progressed smoothly, Sonia started taking more and more of an administrative role in his plans. And her dynamic likely shifted entirely when he brought Casca along with him to Falconia. Up until now, Sonia had no hard proof of Griffith's evil nature, and because she was so enamored with him, she wasn't even going to bother trying to find out. But with Casca, Griffith's biggest abuse victim till date, living in Falconia, it's only a matter of time before Sonia finds out just how revolting the man of her dreams truly is. And in fact, she might have found out already, considering what occurs in chapter 372. It's not like Casca is the kind of woman who would meekly give in to things like capture and kidnapping. She's a Falcon first and foremost, a warrior that fights for what's hers up until her last breath. Sure, she'd lost her mind for a few years, but that was only because of the heinous nature of what Griffith did to her. When she regained her sanity following the Corridor of Dreams ritual, she was pretty much back to herself, except with an added layer of PTSD at the slightest mention of the eclipse. When Griffith shows up to kidnap her, she can't even react because of the pain of her brand and the trauma response her brain experiences. After being taken back to Falconia, she's put under a trance that makes her think she's always been a noblewoman of Falconia. But she still manages to break out of that trance and tries to escape because, once again, Casca is Casca. She's restrained and put back under that spell, and shortly after that, we see Irvine inform Griffith that the little bird's flight was now over. Now, considering this occurred right before we saw Casca getting bewitched, it's natural to assume that the bird he's speaking of is her, right? But what if we told you it was someone else? Someone with a kite-like persuasion. We know that Sonia is a moralistic person based on every scene we've seen her in, so it's natural to expect her reaction to Griffith's kidnapping of Casca to be an unstable one. When he showed up with Casca in his arms in chapter 371, Sonia looks glad to see him return at first, but then her expression changes to one of shock and surprise because she sees Casca in his arms. Let us ask you this. How do you think he squared that with her? Or rather, do you think that he even explained what was going on to her? We don't think so, and the reason for that is the way Sonia sees things, him, and the world at large. Irvine specifically uses the term bird to talk about that person being put back in their cage. That could just be a hunter's way of speaking, but you guys know who else associates themselves with birds by now, right? Now, we hear you guys when you say that Irvine and Sonia are actually friends, but have you considered that he might just be acting like her friend in order to keep an eye on her? Before Griffith returns to Falconia, we see Irvine standing guard over her as opposed to Mule. Mule arrives with Grunbeld and Locus, and then we don't see either him or Casca reconvene with Griffith in chapter 372. What if the reason for that is that the bird Irvine was referring to was Sonia herself? It would make a lot of sense considering how far off Griffith keeps her from his true plans and everything else we just told you guys. If the bird Irvine caged is Sonia, that would give her enough reason to want to turn on Griffith, because it would explain to her everything that had been left unsaid so far with direct action. And her betrayal and eventual escape could be where we see her and Sonia reuniting. In chapter 374, Schierke conducted a ritual to project her astral body into the world spiral tree so she could ride its branches to Falconia and figure out a way to save Casca. Running into Sonia would be jarring for her at first, sure, and the pair might need to have a real conversation about the latter turning her coat, but if anyone can convince Sonia to do that, it's Schierke. If that happens, or rather once that happens, she'll become one of the most invaluable assets Guts has in his crew. Not just because of her abilities, but because of her intimate knowledge of Griffith's current properties, policies, and armies. She would be the perfect whistleblower for the good guys, and once her magic aligns with Schierke's, they'd form an extremely formidable duo that many experienced mages would find tough to defeat. Also, Sonia discovering she was in love with a demon will make her rethink things on a certain level. We just hope it's as deep as we've gone here. Marvelous verdict! But speaking of going deep, that's about as far as we can go with this video. Griffith and Sonia's dynamic is a fascinating case study because it combines all of the Falcon's toxic traits and packages them into a relationship that benefits only him. Once Sonia sees his true face, she'll have trouble recovering herself, but we're sure that she will because this is the same girl that saw her parents get burnt alive. But that's just our opinion. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next Berserk video. Until then, keep struggling, strugglers.